Hi everyone, my name is Innadiated, and this is Evergreen Gardens. Let's go! Hey everybody, welcome to episode 5, and of course that's going to be Evergreen Gardens, which is the largest map in the original scenario series, and has a goal of 1,000 guests at the end of year 4, with a park rating of 600. And it's such a good map. It's really sort of the iconic sandbox map next to Forest Frontiers in terms of, I think, memorable moments. I always, enjoyed coming into Evergreen Gardens, and I was just as excited to come into it this time. Of course, it does have a few downsides, that being that the map is extremely large, and you haven't really encountered a whole lot of the rides and things yet at this point in the game, which can make filling the space a little bit challenging. You also only get the Roman theming, which can make the theming a little challenging, as you really are quite limited in what you can build. I, of course, decided to make this entire build with Evergreen Gardens a Roman theme. I kind of went for like a Roman province. That was sort of the concept coming into it, where there'd be like a couple Roman towns and things like sort of scattered about. I did want to keep the gardens in Evergreen Gardens completely intact, and I was successful in doing that. At least I believe I was successful. I don't keep every single tree and stuff like that, but all of sort of like the main set pieces, the stuff that's like kind of unique, I tried to keep that stuff intact, as I do quite appreciate how beautiful this map is. I think it's one of like the most beautiful starting scenarios. You just come into it, and you look at the map, and it's just got gardens and the lake and all this stuff everywhere. It's a really cool map, and I really like building in this area with the land configuration, and it's not flat, it's got the gardens, it's got the lake, it's got everything. Of course, coming into this map, there is a single peep that's sort of walking around, and so you have to grab him and put him near the entrance, and you want to sort of cut off your pathing and not allow guests to wander too far. Now, I started right at the bat by creating a little town at the start, which also allowed me to sort of cut off the path right there before any intersections or before it went too far in. And I actually spent a fair amount of time just working on this area alone. I pretty much passed the entire scenario right here within this area, and before expanding off into the rest of the park. That was sort of my strategy here, is I didn't want to have people all over, and I did want to sort of get a feel for what I was going to do with the scenery, and I felt that I had more than enough space sort of within the front area of the park to pack in the 1,000 guests, and so I wasn't too worried about that. Starting with the original sort of start rides of the merry-go-round, the twist, and the Ferris wheel, I really wanted to do something interesting with the building, and so I thought it would be kind of neat if given that you don't get like actual buildings and building material in RCT1, what I felt would be kind of interesting is if I sort of stacked the two stations to give sort of a multi-layered building, and then I brought in some land and kind of like sectioned off parts of the station that way, and then added some of those sort of Roman temple theming pieces. And I thought it was kind of interesting from a building perspective, because I'm always trying to figure out new ways in this game, especially in RCT1, not so much in RCT2, as it's really more a matter of getting more scenery and that type of thing. But in RCT1, I'm always trying to find new ways that I can sort of put different simple pieces of scenery together and get different effects. And this was kind of a new one. I had done stuff like that before, but building that one, that was kind of the intention. Was I wanted to see if I could actually create a little bit more of like a complicated building that looked a little bit more intricate than just sort of some land pieced together. I do sort of the same thing a little bit later as well, where I have one of the roller coaster stations sort of cross above a river and act as like a bridge between like two towers that are on opposing sides of the river. It's a little bit neat. Now, of course, this is the remastered version of the episode. This is not the original version of this episode. If you would like to see the original recording and mastering of this episode, you'll be able to go to the version that is linked in the description below. As well, this park will be available on RCT Go, and that link will be in the description below as well. In this remastered version, I actually ended up doing quite a bit. I adjusted a number of the roller coasters. I was actually debating adding a whole new roller coaster, but then when I looked at the land configuration, I had pretty much filled in everything. There's a couple sort of like barren hillsides and things like that, but aside from that, everything's more or less filled. Aside from the garden scenery set pieces, and I didn't want to disturb those. Like I could have maybe built above them and things like that, but I wanted to keep them sort of like front and center. I didn't want anything to obstruct them. I was able to cut down the runtime on this episode a fair amount, bringing it down to probably will be, when I'm done, just under an hour and a half from the original 2 hour 9-minute runtime, which is great. And that is including a bunch of additional footage, which is the sort of enhancements of the park. I went around and I did the fencing along the borders, as I hadn't done that in this one. Well, I had actually done it in most of it, but there was just a few sections that I needed to do it. But the biggest thing really was adjusting the roller coasters. For instance, this one here, I end up adjusting in the remastered footage later on, and I do that for a number of the roller coasters. And honestly, the designs that I came up with originally in this scenario, I wasn't super happy with. Looking back at the footage and things like that, I came into the park and I just felt like each of them was a little bit either too simple or was obstructing or in a weird position, and things like this one here is a little bit too close to the building. And so in the remastered footage coming up later, I do redesign this one a little bit and move it sort of more over to the hillside on the eastern side of the path. It had been quite a while since I had come into this scenario, and I actually thinking, it's kind of funny because I had done Diamond Heights remastering not that long ago, and coming into this one, it was sort of along the lines of like, I figured there actually wouldn't be that much to do, kind of like there wasn't with Diamond Heights, or at least I didn't feel that Diamond Heights really had much I could do. But then when I had gone into Diamond Heights, I actually felt that I probably would be doing a fair amount, as I wasn't super happy with the original Diamond Heights, but that mostly came down to the video. But anyway, and then so coming into this one, I figured I would, because I was really happy with the Evergreen Gardens video, mostly because I was actually able to complete it. It was at the time my longest park at 2 hours and 9 minutes, and the editing in that one was awful because I was totally overwhelmed by the amount of footage that I had taken. I just, like I hadn't done an episode that was as detailed as Evergreen Gardens yet, and it sort of like reached my video editing limits at the time, as it was just it took too long and I was frustrated with it, and by the end I just sort of wanted to get it over with and get it put together and get it out there. And of course at the time I didn't have like hardly any subscribers or anything, and hardly anyone was watching my videos anyway, so it was sort of like, well, let's just get it out there and move on, because I've been doing this for long enough and I don't really know if it's worth it or not anyway. But so that was what I did. And yeah, the editing on that one just wasn't good, and I've hopefully fixed a lot of it. There was a lot of dead space, places where I wasn't actually building and I was just zooming around in the camera, and it definitely needed to be cleaned up, and so I was able to remove a fair amount of footage without impacting the video at all. And then of course I'm able to speed it up now, and I use multiple speeds now, so between the two, the efficiency on this video has been increased by quite a bit, like 50%, which is great. So almost at the end of year 4. So yeah, as you can see, I pretty much just stayed within the front bounds. I worked on the town, tried to get it there. We can see the completed building and sort of what I was talking about how I was mixing the two levels of stations and land and stuff to try to come up with a unique building design. And I'm actually really happy with the building design in this one. I don't think I've done anything quite like it since I did this episode. There we go, I've passed the scenario now. And now the real fun can begin. So if you're new to the series, the way my videos typically work is I will build out a park to completion, or at least to what I feel is completion. There's been a couple episodes where, I didn't build out the park completely because I was sort of looking at a different objective or goal with what I was looking to do with that scenario. But usually what I'm trying to do is build out the whole park and do it with detail and do it in career mode without any cheats. And a funny story, so I come into Evergreen Gardens and I just start building, right? And then I ran out of money and I was like, what is going on? And I had gone negative. And actually when I was doing the park, I mean, I hadn't worried too much about it because by the end I had a fair amount of money and things, but somehow I had left the park in basically the condition where it was negative monthly if you're not running ads and things like that. The balancing of the pricing of everything was totally off. Of course, it's at this point an entrance fee park, but I'm talking about even like the food and how many employees I had. I had way too many employees for the type of income I was making. So I was becoming negative really quickly, and I had to actually go around and sort of fix all that so that the save file does not give you a negative park. And someone had commented not too long ago about getting stats like the amount of money that the park produces and things like that. And I could put stats like that, although I don't know how necessarily meaningful they are in the way that I structure my parks. Because the way that I structure my parks is that I will actually start with like money per ride, and then I will make all the rides free, and then I switch to an entrance fee park. And then usually you have to like start running ads, and then I can like sort of pump and control like when I get cash flow and things like that. So, like on sort of an average, just the park isn't doing anything, like I'm not managing it. It's just sort of running. By the end of the game, when the map is full and I've switched to an entrance fee park and people are just sort of coming in, like maybe that's meaningful information, although I don't know how meaningful it is. Because really where the majority of like the strategy for cash flow was done is trying to get the cash to actually build this stuff, right? So as fast as I'm making cash, I'm usually spending it, which makes it very difficult to just track sort of how much I'm making. Like I'm not doing like the Marcel Voss thing, right? Where his testing and his ability to do that type of thing is done in a very controlled environment. So it's like he sets up the environment and he creates like the perfect conditions to run the test with the least amount of interference. Given the way that I design my parks have like maximum interference. There's there's so much going on and there's so many different things, and it's not the same. Like you might have one month that's just like terrible financially, and then you might have the next month where it's great. Just due to the number of variables and things that are potentially happening and when things happened. And then at the end of the park, of course, once everything's full and you've sort of reached like your max population, you're probably looking at maybe $1,000 to $3,000, $4,000 per month profit. But that's also completely like sort of without running any ads or pushing any sort of like mass entrance fees. That's like almost entirely just shop stall money and entrance fee money, which is not bad. So basically, like by the time that I filled the map, as long as I can make the budget positive so that you're making some money every month without any interaction by the user, like to make it, you don't want to have it negative. That's sort of my objective at the end of the map, is to have any positive value. Of course, a higher positive value is great, but also usually by that point, it's the objective is to retain as many people as possible and make the park as full as possible. So I often do that by making things, by not making money the focus. That aside, I will try to incorporate sort of a midpoint overview. I have gotten a few requests for this idea, sort of at real time or a slow speed, and I will try to incorporate that into future recordings. I can't do it with the previous recordings, but I can do it with any new parks moving forward. I will give it a shot. Now, as we get into the center of the park, I can talk a little bit about that maze area, which is in the original RCT1 quite a big problem for the people and their path navigation. And the reason why is something that I touched on a little bit in the Pacific Pyramids, where because the peeps see with junctions and those like sort of areas inside the flower beds have like 4 junctions all attached, and then one's like facing the entrance, but There's so many junctions around it that for a peep to figure his way out, they often get lost and they all get stuck in like that one little area. We'll see if it comes back to where that is. But and that's mostly because of the junction issue and because they can only see with the junctions. So I remove those and I replace it with a maze, and I just remove like basically the whole insides. This coaster here is called the Roman Legion. I'm quite pleased with the corkscrew design that I came up with in this. In fact, I'd say in this map that corkscrew coaster is my favorite coaster. It's really tight. It has like a really nice velocity curve. The way that it goes through all the different inversions and stuff, I managed to get really nice velocity at those moments. And I think it just has a nice style. I mean, the corkscrew coaster is one of my favorite coasters. I think it's quite versatile in what you can do with it. You can usually make things look very interesting with it. A little bit of dirt path to sort of give it the more gardeny forest look coming out of there. You know, I didn't want it to be one big continuous city or town or something like that. I kind of wanted like a town and then some sort of like nature area and then like maybe a few buildings and then maybe another town. And I felt that Evergreen Gardens had enough space that I could kind of pull that off. And I guess really ultimately there's only like two towns, but there's a fair amount of buildings and things between them. Yeah, that's the area I'm talking about. The flower bed there with the maze inside it. That's the area where guests get lost. And I just removed the paths inside, made it a little maze. I later put a go-karts right next to it. I wanted to give it just a little bit more structure. And I really like the Roman walls. The Roman walls, I think, are one of my favorite wall types in this game. They're just really neat. The four columns kind of stacked side by side, especially since you can put them on an incline and they'll actually like properly go down the incline one by one by one. They don't just like tilt on the side or whatever. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, you know, those are definitely one of my favorite wall types in this game. You can, I mean, aside from the fact that it's white and very Roman, because if you put too many of them, each time you put one, it just makes it look more and more and more Roman. So if you're going to use them outside of a Roman theme, you know, you have to be selective about where you want to do it, I think. But ultimately, they're still one of my favorite ones. It would be nice if you could like change the color of them or something. That would make them a lot more versatile. Here we have the go-karts. So what I kind of wanted to do with this go-karts is bring it in and around, make it like really tight. And I didn't want any of the sort of go-kart wooden support structure showing. I wanted it to be sort of like wrapped in the Roman walls so that it was sort of like a roadway, you know, stretching through the gardens and next to some buildings. And yeah, I really like that go-karts actually. In out of all the go-kart designs I've done so far, that this one is my favorite. Same with this car ride here. I wanted to do something like kind of like a car ride fun house, you know, where that's going through and driving through different levels and in and out of buildings and stuff like that. So I attempted to pull that off with this one here, and I think this is actually like the first time I did this in the series with this ride type specifically. I mean, there's a car ride in Forest Frontiers, but in terms of trying to actually kind of turn it into something, I think this was probably the first time that I actually tried to do that. And yeah, I really like this one with the bridge, and I don't think I've actually pulled off one that's quite as nice as this one yet. Again, I mean, there was the ones in Pacific Pyramids, but not not quite like this, like with the whole building and everything moving in and out and things. And you can see lots of stuff going around, and the entrance is like sort of, in the center of it, so you have to have the queue line go through the building too. And yeah, it's just the layout on that one was really neat. In this map, I more or less took like a sweep approach where I built the rides and I built the scenery at the same time. It's very different from what I did sort of in Leafy Lake or some of the other maps that I've done, where I'll often go off and build rides or pre-plan things and stuff. In this one, given that I had such a long period of time to reach the objective and there's so much space in this one, that I just felt that pre-planning it was kind of not feasible. There would just be too much going on, and it just made more sense to sort of sweep along and complete each and every ride, each and every area, and then sort of move on to the next one and move on to the next one and sort of piece them together that way. Especially given that Evergreen Gardens already had all the different scenery everywhere. I had to sort of come into each area with a design that would complement the scenery that already existed there. I thought this was a neat ride, the powered launch drop, or a low belly ride here. I always try to put it underground if I can, with the paths wrapping around it in that sense, but not always. But in this case, I thought it was neat, and then having the entrance building sort of inside that other building, I thought looked nice. Now, the two statues that are actually in front of it are simply to accommodate the height of the entrance, because of course the entrance building, when you're doing buildings like this, has a height requirement of 5, whereas I think the exit has a height requirement of 3. But yeah, so I just put like sort of a one tile raised land and a statue on top of it to account for it, but underneath those is the entrance and the exit. Now doing the wooden coaster. Yeah, wooden coaster. I don't remember what I called it. Oh yeah, Evergreen Woody. That's what. Yeah, Evergreen Woody is what this one's called, because it's Evergreen Gardens and it's a wooden roller coaster. That's right. But I really like this one. And actually, in the remastered footage, I do work a little bit on this one as well, as I felt that the area coming up out of the underground of the lake was just a little high. I wanted to actually show more of the scenery in and around it. And I just felt that the massive, like, sort of web of wooden roller coaster supports there was just getting in the way. That sort of like big thing right there, right in the center. So I actually redo that area and try to lower the track and what it does in the area so that you can see more. And I'm really happy with how it looks now. We'll see how it looks closer to the end of the video as an end result. But yeah, this even the original version, I really quite like this coaster. I used it in the recent trailer. It was the only part of Evergreen Gardens I used, mostly just because I knew I was going to be doing a new outro, so I didn't want to like include really too much of anything that wasn't going to be present in the final version of the remastered version. And also I just didn't want to give also too much away about the changes I had made, so I used old footage, but it's something that still exists, and yeah, that type of a thing, right? But yeah, really happy with this wooden coaster. Sort of wrapped it in and around this car ride here. Aside from the coasters, I pretty much maxed out all of the different rides that I could use, even the various water rides and water ride types and stuff like that. So, you know, I think I use all 3 car ride types. So it's you know, I was really sort of stretching to figure out what rides I can use and how to distribute them around the map so that I didn't end up with any dead areas. I wanted to have sort of an even distribution and have rides everywhere. And in the end, I think this park ends up with 5 roller coasters. Hold on, let me count here. We've got the steel mini roller coaster, we've got the steel coaster, we've got the wooden coaster, we've got the corkscrew coaster, there's a suspended coaster. Yeah, so we got 5 coasters, and we've built 3 so far. But I also, the station of this. The station is really nice. I like how I was able to sort of get the entrance and the exit to the queue pass down below, and then bring the queue up and then wrap it around sort of the statues, and then I have the exit path sort of go under and connect with the station that way. And yeah, it looks really nice. Out of all the buildings, that one might be one of my favorites in this map. Just due to the way the queue wraps around the statue and it's always full. And then you have like the car going down just by the queue there and things. And I don't know, I think it's a really neat look just in that one area. A little bit of decoration here. I end up turning this into a sort of station for the boat hire. I wanted to use the boat hire again as sort of a transport ride around the lake, so I use one for that, and then I also set up the swan rides and the bumper boats as well. Of course, having the monorail stretch all the way around the park is great. This is a great park for the monorail, is the shuttle mode while you're building out and sort of building up your rides really helps to, you know, make some money, transport the guests, you get another ride out of it, and also, you know, actually use your monorail while you're building around Evergreen Gardens instead of having to, like, you know, pre-plan and build out this giant, you know, either monorail network or build a small one and build a temporary one. The shuttle mode with this is extremely helpful. And so the way that I typically build a monorail in this map is I will put it in shuttle mode, build out each station as I sort of sweep across the map, And then at the end, of course, connect it, put it into circuit mode, and then I can throw on more trains and stuff like that. Right now it's just got the one train running that's like a large train. I connected the rowboat sort of faux transport ride directly into the monorail station there, and then I also have the railroad station right near there. So there's a lot of transport ride interconnectivity there within just a few junctions of each other. It's sort of like a transport ride hub. Another rail station here at the back. I didn't want to make the rail sort of very large, but I did like the idea of putting the railway as sort of like a side-by-side railway, as opposed to sort of like just a single track loop or a double track loop. I wanted it to be more like railway-ish than amusement park railway-ish. I wanted it to actually look kind of like a railway. And actually at the back of the park there, where I do the river rapids, it's definitely one of my... I think it's like the most visually appealing part of the park, the way that I did like the different trees, and then it's got the railway and sort of the river and then the river rapids, and we're not going to see it for a while, but there's something about that area that I really like, and it's different than all the other areas, just in the end result and the way that it looks. It doesn't look anything like any of the other areas in Evergreen Gardens, and I don't think it really looks like any other area that I've built before at all, really. I should try to aim for that look somewhere, maybe a different layout or something like that, or some sort of a theme based on it or something, because it is really interesting. And every time I look at it, I'm just like, oh gee, I can't believe looks that good in a game this old. It's just, there's just something striking about the textures and the color palette used in the different models and sprites and in the game, and how they can contrast and the way that you can combine them to create just like these amazingly, different themed areas with so few tools. Like, it feels like so many tools, but it's really not that many tools. But it's just the right amount of tools, I guess, but we'll get to the theming of that area later. Now, this is where I plan to do the second town. This one I wanted to have a water slide embedded in the town, and my thinking was like it would sort of be like the water system of the town, and we'd have like these pipes going through to all of the different buildings and sort of providing an interconnectivity that way, and it was going to be extremely dense. I wanted it to be like multiple levels and buildings everywhere and walkways everywhere. This is that sort of bridge tower station I was telling you about earlier with the suspended roller coaster. I do work on this one in the remastered footage as well as the steel one. I rework almost every roller coaster. The only ones I didn't touch are the corkscrew and the I guess it's just the corkscrew coaster. Yeah, it's just the corkscrew coaster. I touched all the other ones. I didn't touch the corkscrew coaster at all. I thought it was great. But I actually rework like pretty much every other one. Like this steel coaster, I should have kept that design, honestly. Maybe, why didn't I keep that design? There was a reason. But yeah, the steel coaster especially, I did not like the design I had come up with in the original episode. It actually just wasn't appealing to me, and so I've changed that one now. I've actually decided to keep more of the steel coaster on the southern side of the big sort of station bridge. So I actually moved the loop, and I don't loop the monorail anymore. I actually moved the loop to the other side, but we'll see that a little bit later as well, because yeah, this thing got just a little bit like crazy. Like, I don't know, what is that? I don't know. But yeah, I try to fix it and change that side up a little bit and do something a little bit different with it. And same thing with the suspended coaster. Overall, the suspended coaster, I was pretty happy with the design. It just had a little bit too much momentum coming into the station there, and I felt that I could probably make the track a little bit, I don't know, quote unquote, safer. But yeah, so I tried to just absorb a little bit more of that momentum and add a little bit more to the track, as there really was quite a bit. And even with just the 2-car trains, I had hoped that would sort of like kill the momentum, but it has a little bit too much. So I do make that change a little bit later. But I would say out of all the coasters, it's the 2 steel ones that I really rework the most, and then the wood one, and then the suspended one is probably the closest to the original version from this video. But overall, I'm happier with the final revisions. I think they're better, even though they may not be they might be a little bit more like sort of tamed down. They're not quite as like, oh, it's going around the monorail track and stuff. But it's I think that overall they fit the sort of design of the park better, and show off more scenery, and just don't look quite as out of place as I felt that those ones looked. So hopefully you guys all approve of those changes, and we're not hoping that the download would contain 100% of the original designs, as unfortunately, yes, the version that is going to be uploaded to RCT Go will be the version that is sort of fixed up and changed, and the coasters will be changed for that version. But like I said, I think they're better. Let me know if you agree or disagree, or I don't know, have a different opinion about life. Whatever. Let me know. I always read all the comments, so please leave comments and tell me about all the things. So now building the chairlift. So what I was thinking was, in addition to the transport rides I had already built, because we've got the monorail there, and we've got the train, and we've got our sort of like water-based ones, what I wanted to do was have one chairlift connecting from the north of the park all the way to sort of the other town, like sort of connecting the 2 towns, right? So that there was a transport ride directly between them. And then I also put another chairlift connecting all the way to the east side, because this town was all the way at the sort of the southwest of the map, and so I wanted the chairlift to also go all the way over to where the River Rapid ride was, which would be at like the southeast of the map, and that way there was like some nice connectivity between those main destinations. And then you've got like sort of the train going around the lake, and then we've got the monorail going around nearly the whole map, and then sort of the water ride, the rowboat, going around the lake as well, so that people can get around there. And with all of that put together, I felt that was quite a bit of transport, so it's it's really easy to fill all the different quadrants of the park, because once guests like sort of get into this park, it's a massive labyrinth of different sections and things like that, because it is the largest map and scenario in the original scenario series. This building as well, I think, is quite good. Not quite as good as the wooden roller coaster one. I didn't really like the ramps going into it, but it is what it is. Like, it would be nice if this was RCT2 and those were stairs. Sometimes I prefer stairs, sometimes I like ramps, but in this case, I would have preferred they were stairs. I think that probably would have looked more natural. But with the ramps, it's okay. It's still a very nice building, and especially with the decoration and the gardens. I love the gardens in this. There's just so much to look at in this particular scenario, and with each garden I wanted to sort of like either just keep it and enhance it, or sort of like do something more with it, but I didn't want to remove any of it. So if there was like a line of trees, like unique trees like those ones there, I would want to either keep exactly the trees I had, minus maybe one or two if I have to put a ride through it like with the roller coaster, but also I could add to the line or whatever. So I wanted to sort of be a little bit dynamic there, give myself a little bit of flexibility so that I would be able to, actually create interesting designs, but also fit them into the scenery. I thought that having sort of like a wall of trees there would be kind of neat. So, the coaster's starting position there, sort of hidden behind it, and then it pops out and goes up the chain lift. Then we've got those, I think those are apple trees. And I sort of just throw some dirt and try to spruce those up a little bit as well to make it a little bit different than just a big field of trees, as I felt that those were pretty unique too. Something that kind of worked out, and I was a little surprised at this, but I was able to actually keep the chairlift going all the way from the south of the map to the north of the map between the two towns, like at the exact same height. So it doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. Both stations are exactly at the same height, and I didn't actually like plan it that way. It just worked out that way, and I was like, oh, that's cool, So that was cool. I think that maybe at the end there it might go down like one step to like drop into the town or whatever, but yeah, I was able to pretty much get them going at the exact same height, and it's a pretty good height too. Like, they're up there, but they're not that high up there, so it really does feel like they're sort of like going down and around through the various areas of this Roman province. Oh yeah, right. I was saying earlier. So yeah, I'm not very good at naming, especially with like Rome stuff. I don't know too much about Rome. I've never really like significantly studied Rome, and I don't have like a whole bunch of facts about it off the top of my head or whatever. So pretty much everything is just named like Roman something, just to make it easy. Or there was, I think there might be a couple other ride names, but there's no like really good ride names in this one, or special ride names, except maybe for the Evergreen Woody. But that's not even a Roman one. That's just a generic one. Yeah, I've never been a very good name person. So building this town was interesting, as I had very little idea what I was actually going to have the end result look like how high the building should be and what the layout should be. I just sort of like started building and seeing what I could connect to what, and where I could put like a bridge or whatever, and then it was like, okay, if I can put a bridge here, then there'll have to be a building here, and Yeah, and then I wanted to like connect it to basically the areas I had set up, the sort of the pre-planned buildings with the water slide. And I wanted a double pathway, and I think that this is the only time that I've actually done the sort of double walkway, where there's a walkway on top, and then there's a walkway underneath, and then there's actually like another walkway that's underneath, and all three of them have like different destinations, so that it's not like they just cross and then instantly connect. Like one sort of starts somewhere, and another one starts somewhere, and um, yeah, it was really neat. I really wanted to, sort of have like all of these different paths and the water slide and all these things blah, 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 popping in and out, where you didn't really sort of know what was going to where without really looking at it and studying it. I really wanted to make it look quite complex. It probably looks more complex than it actually is when I'm done. Like if you break it down, it's not actually as complex as it looks, but again, due to like the different layering and having all of the different things sort of interacting, I've got like the space rings there, the water slides going up and coming down, and then we've got all the different paths, and we've got some food court there, we've got the roller coaster, the suspended coaster, we've got the chairlift coming in. So all these things are sort of all like compressed into this small area on different levels, and yeah, it just looks really neat. I think it's one of my favorite scenes in the map in terms of like complexity and design and architecture and things like that. uh, I would say this would be my favorite area for that, more so than the sort of entrance town or some of the other like more simplified architecture. I really wanted to just go all out on this one. This was sort of like the cream of the crop. This was going to be the main Roman city of Evergreen Gardens, and I wanted to make sure that it really felt that way, that it felt like sort of you had made it, like you got to the back of the park, you were there, finally, there it is, you've made it to the Roman city. I guess would be called Rome, but I just called the whole thing Rome, and I called the thing in Dynamite Dunes Rome. So who knows what the real Rome is, but that was the objective here. And having like sort of the water slide around, I felt gave it sort of uh, like a feeling, because I didn't want to do the aqueducts again. That was something that I tried to stay away from. I was like, okay, I had done the aqueducts in Dynamite Dunes, and despite the fact that this is like a Roman map, I didn't want to do that idea again because it had only been like sort of 3 scenarios later. And I don't want to repeat ideas. I want to try to make each scenario unique, try to give it a unique setting, and not just like repeat rides or repeat like major set pieces like that, right? So instead, I figured that I would use the water slide and I would integrate it into the town and have it sort of act like a aqueduct that way, but not quite the same as the one that I had done in Dynamite Dunes with the log flume. I wanted it to be a little bit more like hidden, like, it's like, oh, it pops out here and it goes in here, and then it pops out here and it goes in here, and everything's just interconnected with these sort of like aqueducts, and they'd sit above the paths, as you can see with that one there. And that was sort of the idea, is I wanted them to be going up above the paths into the buildings, and then have the buildings supporting the rides. And getting a good design that didn't get any stuck either was really important. A key component of them not getting stuck is the minimum wait time. So that because there's multiple lifts for the water slide, the way that I mitigate them getting bunched up in case one breaks down is that the minimum wait time that's currently set up ensures that there's always like one that's been cleared before the next one. So each one is always on its own lift, basically. And by the time that it goes to the next lift, or by the time that it's reached some point where it's safe and they're not going to get bunched up, then a new one can depart. Now, of course, as with all other rides, there is the one scenario where you have like sort of a departure and then an immediate breakdown, and then because the ride gets fixed, it does an immediate departure, and then you have two back to back, and then the ride breaks down like again immediately, and then they start getting stuck. So there is a situation where they can start to bunch up and they can start to get stuck, but it's extremely unlikely and requires the ride to basically break down 3 times in a couple minutes, basically. Much like with the Pacific Pyramids build, the mechanics in this one do take quite a while to actually get to and fix rides or inspect rides or things like that. Just due, of course, to the size of the park and the complexity of the architecture. They have to go through a lot of things to get to places. So do be mindful of that when you check this park out. You might want to hire more or do more with the mechanics or assign them to different places. Again, I just let them all free roam currently. That's usually how I like to do my parks and how I'll upload them to RCT Go. But if you do take the park and sort of continue and run with it, just be mindful of that the rides you'll get a lot of like notices that this ride still hasn't been fixed, and this ride still hasn't been fixed, and this ride still hasn't been fixed. And yeah, you're gonna have to make that a little bit more efficient if you want those notices to go away. But again, they always fix it eventually. They always find the ride. It's not a matter of finding it, it's just a matter of getting there in time, as is usually the case with large maps with complex architecture. Almost done the town. I was really happy with how that looked at this point. It was quite nice, I thought. I hadn't really done anything to this scale yet in the series. I mean, Leafy Lake, I guess, is close. You could consider Leafy Lake to be close. There's quite a bit going on in Leafy Lake, but I didn't feel that it was really exactly quite to the same scale as I wanted to do with Evergreen Gardens. Evergreen Gardens really did just sort of push the max of my video editing and recording capability. Like it was, there's just so many different sections. There's so many different views. Even doing the outro, there's so many different places that I can get footage from in this park. And it does make it difficult to put something together. And that was sort of one of the things that I really felt needed to be fixed in this episode also, was the outro. It's a good outro. In fact, I was using it for my trailer up until recently, as I didn't want to use the old outro for the trailer if I was going to be replacing it. But looking back at it, there's a lot of missed opportunities. That was sort of really early into my outro making style. I had I hadn't figured out exactly what I was doing with outros yet. I had started to understand, and Evergreen Gardens was really one of the first experiments where I really played around with doing interesting things that I thought would be kind of cool, and it gave me the room to experiment with those things. But there was also a lot of misses in that outro, and I just, looking back at it, I think it'll be much better this time around. So I hope you'll stick around for that. When I had been building this car ride, the first time I had actually built it and completed it, and I was almost about to save my game, and then the game crashed, and I actually lost all the work. So I had to come in and sort of like, luckily I always try to like save in between completing individual rides and things like that. It's kind of a habit, so it's pretty rare that I forget. But with this one, yeah, I had done all this work, and I had come in, and I'd made the tunnel, and I'd made the ride, and I made it look pretty much exactly the same as that. I was able to duplicate it almost exactly to what I had before. I think anyway. It's hard for me to tell because there's really very little difference between them, except maybe some fencing and things like that. But yeah, that was a real shame. I was, and after that, I became like totally paranoid and started saving my game like every 5 minutes, which really made the editing in this video difficult the first time around. Is there's saves everywhere. In fact, there's so many saves that it's one of the few episodes where I had actually like missed saves in my scrubbing of the video, and saves actually made it into the final video. So in the original version of this episode, you actually see me save the game like 3 times, and I never try to have those in the video. I don't want you guys to see me saving the game or doing boring management stuff. It should just be a straight like build, like all the way through. That's sort of what I aim to do, is just have it building the whole way through and not have any interruption in the build, as I do think that's like sort of the most important part of what's going to put something together. Like the minute to minute decisions are one thing. Unfortunately, I build for too long to really explain those, because there's so many decisions being made over the course of a 20 or 30 year run that it becomes quite tedious to try to enumerate all of them over that period of time. But, so I focus mostly on just the build. What did we build? What do we have going here? How did I deal with any major issues that arise, like the money thing and stuff like that? So... This area here is pretty interesting, actually, because it's often said that like the guests can't navigate that path that's sort of like leading to the water, but I've never had issues with guests navigating that path or getting lost around that path. And of course, the reason is that it's facing away from the entrance. So it's never going to be mistaken for a direction that's getting a guest closer to the entrance. The one area where they do get stuck in sort of that, gardeny area, which I replaced with a maze, the main reason they get stuck is there's so many junctions, and the junction into that area is in the direction of the entrance. So if a guest doesn't know what's ahead of them and they can only see in junctions, well, there's 5 junctions in there, and then they go in there and then they can never get out, basically, and they have no idea that doesn't lead to the entrance, because there's 5 junctions and they can only see 5 junctions, unless they have a park map, at which case they probably didn't go in there. But yeah, so but this one over here, the one that goes to what I ended up turning into the bumper boat's dock, does not suffer from that same issue. Actually, you can do things pretty decently, and it'll be completely fine. Now we're finally getting into the theming of this area here. So this is where I really started to get into the one of the where I have the river rapids and the train. And I, like I said earlier in this video, I had actually wanted to do something quite different with that area in comparison to the rest of the gardens and the sort of like just stock nature, I guess you could say, that I had been doing up until this point with the rest of the park. Not that it looks bad, it's just sort of like default nature, you know what I mean? So and then there's the gardens, and a big reason that I did just sort of like the default nature was I did want to keep the emphasis on the existing gardens, and I didn't really want to create like competing set pieces. I just wanted to create complementary set pieces. So the way that I figured I'd do it is try to create like sort of like subdued tertiary scenery, like with the nature and stuff like that, and then try to create architecture that would blend in well with the various gardens that were already there, and then with the gardens that were already there, extend and enhance them if required to sort of like fill the area that I was envisioning with the architecture. And so with this one, I wanted to do something quite a bit different, and I felt that the railroad gave me a good opportunity to do that. As I think the railroad, from like a aesthetic perspective, is really like quite beautiful. Like you can do a lot with it because there's just, I mean, like that's why people love like model trains and stuff like that, right? Like it's the train alone, there's something about trains and the train tracks and going off into the distance, and I don't know what it is, but it's a very versatile tool, I find, when it comes to scenery. You can, train tracks really just, they say a lot. They have a loud voice in any scene that they're seen in. They're always quite noticeable. And you can do a lot with them. They blend into almost everything, right? Like you can pretty much put them in any type of scene except maybe something like futuristic, although I did that as well with the Pacific Pyramids. I had like literally a mine train and a train next to my sci-fi section. So I take it back, you can do it with futuristic as well. But yeah, I think that it's really just, it was sort of what provided the inspiration for this area, because when I had the train there and then I saw the river rapids, and with the river rapids providing sort of like the rocky area, like I set up the rocky area there with the turbulent water, and I looked at that and it looked so different than everything that I had sort of been building up until this point. And then of course with the building here, I kind of went back to like the more sort of gardeny Roman architecture, but then having it bordered by the sort of densely, it's not dense, but it is dense, but I use those like short trees. And really what gives it the color difference in this area is I used a lot more of those sort of like yellow trees. So I tried to like not use very much green and instead use like dark green or more so the sort of like yellowy trees that I often use for like alien theme sections and things like that. But I thought that the contrast of the sort of like dirt and the rock and then the yellowy trees, it feels like fall. That's the look that I was going for, right? Like it feels like fall. That's what I wanted it to sort of feel like going through there. You're going through in the train and you just have like leaves all around you and different colors and uh, going by the river rapids, that was what I was going for in this area. Was I really wanted to make it quite colorful in in like an autumn fall type way. Fall the season for anyone that's not a native English speaker listening to this. I'm not talking about like falling off a cliff. I'm talking about the season fall, which comes before winter. And then with the river rapids there and the chute sort of out of the building. I don't know what that building is exactly. Like I sort of, with the Roman theme, I sort of like stopped trying to come up with conceptual ideas of what these buildings are and why they're there. I have like sort of the general idea that I have like towns, and then I don't know, maybe this is another town. I mean, there's enough buildings within proximity that it could probably be considered another town, and it does have like the connectivity with the chairlift and things like that. So, and the other train station is pretty close as well, and the monorail station. So I guess it could be considered a town. So we'll say this Roman province has 3 towns in total, and this is the third one here. Although this one I don't think is, maybe it's the smallest town. Really, it's or like not the smallest in terms of size, but the smallest in terms of density, because it's a few like large buildings sort of separated by gardens and that type of stuff. But we'll say it's a town. So building the other station here, I really wanted the rail stations to be quite grand. I really like the idea of having the railway cross the river as well. I wanted to have that sort of like little mini train bridge there. I thought it sort of contrasted with the train tracks and the autumn sort of setting quite well, coloring up the sort of base of the grass along the river with the dirt grass texture, which of course is my favorite texture in the game. It's quite versatile, and as you can see, if you sort of mix and mash it with all these other things, you can end up getting a quite realistic look, I think, for, again, considering the graphics and the technology of the game. I think it's quite nice. So my thinking in this one was sort of along the same lines of with Leafy Lake, where the lake would be bordered by the dirt grass, and then as you went sort of up higher into the areas that were closer around the towns, you'd start to see a lot more perfect grass, but then I'd spread out and sort of dither in these various dirt grass, squares, so that you don't get the contrast of like, oh, okay, over here is like green grass and over here is like dirt grass. You got to have some sort of a blending or something to just sort of bring the two worlds together and blend them into something that naturally transitions from one into the other. So now we're in the remastered footage, and the very first thing that I decided to do was to rebuild this. I pretty much rebuilt the whole coaster because, aside from the initial drop and the exit, the main coaster took place sort of over the entrance of the park here. And I really did not like how it was just sitting directly over the path. It felt very out of place to me, and I wanted it to be more on the hillside there, as you can see. Now, because it was a little bit closer to where the observation tower was, I figured I may as well extend sort of the architecture of that and give it a little tunnel or something and just make it sort of blend in a little bit more that way as well. And yeah, I think this train design is quite a bit better, or roller coaster design is quite a bit better. Got trains on the brain, but it's more interesting. I think the other one was kind of like, I don't know, lapish. Like it went straight and then would turn around and then straight the other way. And this one's got some diagonal pieces and wraps around a little bit differently. And so here we go with the wooden coaster. That was more or less the change I made. So the new version is lower and you're able to see a lot more of the surrounding scenery there. In particular, the water splash for the wooden roller coaster was completely hidden in the original one. It was like you wouldn't know that a water splash was there basically unless you were looking closely, because there were so many trees and stuff, you'd have to look through it. And so not only did I revamp the coaster itself, but I also decided to change up the trees in the area. Now we're doing the steel coaster, and again, this one I was not happy with the original, and so I figured that I need to do something that's a little bit different. Make it look maybe a little bit more natural and not so spaghetti-y. And I wanted to have a little bit more on this side as well, so that it didn't feel so spaghetti-y. Now, I wasn't able to really do the sort of like high-speed turn under the bridge that I had been doing originally. I did quite like that, but I think the ramp down is fine. Going through the loop there, it's not quite the like bank turn thing that I had going there, which I thought was really neat, but it does go under the bridge still and come up through the path, and it has some interaction there. In this one, I felt that the rowboats just went a little too close to the swan boats, and there wasn't enough distance there, and it just didn't look very natural to me. So here I go, I'm sort of fixing up the scenery, and yeah, I wanted the water splash to be a lot more visible, basically. I wanted you to be able to see it going through there, and especially even from the path, I sort of like cleared it so that you could see from the path and see the train going down there. Well, I mean, I would imagine that you can see it from the path. Of course, we'll never know because that view does not exist in the game, but just based on the layout and things, in theory, if you were on the path, you should now be able to see the water splash, whereas before you would not have been able to. Doing the suspended coaster. Now, this coaster, again, really the problem here that I was trying to solve is that the original version had too much momentum, even with the two-car trains. And so this fix here is just to sort of get it to do a little bit more, just enough that it doesn't come in slamming up against the other trains that are waiting in the station. Now, it might still crash with a brakes failure. They are still going pretty fast going in there, even with the adjustment, but they're quite a bit better. And that brings us to the end of the time lapse. So I will now see you on the other side. There we go. That is Evergreen Gardens. It's such a fun map to try to fill. I think I did a pretty good job in this build. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and here is the end result.